Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So this is me trying to do this video again. The internet cut out in the middle of me doing this video. Just blink. Push me to my knees. Push me to my knees. Metaphorically, of course. You can say cut me off at the knees. I want to thank everyone who comes. Thank everyone who supports the show, whether it's through PayPal, Super Cash, sharing my videos, or liking my videos. You guys are immensely appreciated, and you guys help the show go on. It is, as a flat fact, true. Without the people supporting the show would not exist. So, whatever you guys can help with, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Let's hop across the pond. Hop across the pond. Theresa May. Let's take a look at this. This is a picture. That's failure. This is a picture of unmitigated, uncorruptible failure. Back-breaking, soul-crushing failure. What I mean by this is, she believes in ponies and fairy tales. She is a person of impossible things. She is one of those people who say, I can think of 30 possible impossible things in the morning before breakfast. And a few of those things I will give and submit to the EU as a way of trying to get past Brexit. She has a problem. She has an Ireland problem. When people were crafting Brexit, they didn't quite think through what are going to be the implications and repercussions for Ireland. Northern Ireland is somewhat of a tricky situation in Britain, or you could say Ireland in general. They came up with the Good Friday Agreement to cut down on hostilities between two warring parties and bringing Ireland into the UK. Comfortably. Violence to the wayside, into the UK. Well, Northern Ireland is in the UK. Other part, the Republic of Ireland, is in the European Union. Uh-oh. How's that going to work? Well, we don't want a hard border between Northern Ireland now, do we? In between Northern Ireland and Republic of Ireland. Okay? You don't want that. Good. How do you do that? How do you accomplish that? Because fact is, if you're in the European Union, it's almost like being part of the Federation of Planets. Now, what I mean by that, if you're part of Starfleet, you have to agree to certain things with their charter, meaning you're under a regulatory body of the Federation. And yes, there are certain benefits that come with that, but there are also things that certain member states must adhere to. Federal law supersedes state law. If you want to be part of us, you have to adhere to these things. Now, if the Republic of Ireland is in the European Union and it adheres to those things, meaning trade and all these other things that go through, they adhere to these things so they can trade within that particular union. No issue. Britain wants to be Brexit. They want to be away. We want to be our own thing. We want to say fuck all to the rest of the world. We want to make our own trade deals. We want to be a singular thing. We want to be a sovereign nation again. We want to be Brits. Fuck the rest. Fine. Good with that. Problem with that is your trade, your regulatory bodies are going to be different than the European Union's now. The European Union, again, is kind of like the Federation. If you want to trade with them, you have to be part of the Federation and adhere to those rules. But you said fuck all to that stuff. And fair enough on that. Good on you for that. I appreciate your gumption. But you're stuck with that issue now. There needs to be a border between you two places, because if there's not a border, certain things can go into the European Union that the European Union does not allow. What are you going to do? How are you going to solve that, Theresa May, the person who believes in impossible things? Here's the catch. She has said that there will be no hard border between Northern Ireland. She has also said she doesn't want a customs union. A customs union will try to meld that intermediary thing between those things. She doesn't want either one of those things. And it is almost an impossibility that you can get away without one of them. How are you going to solve that, Theresa May? It seems that her own party, or members of her own party, are now doubting Theresa May, because Theresa May has had a stunning defeat in the House of Lords. The European Union is literally, openly, talking about annexing Northern Ireland. Theresa May, how are you going to solve this issue? They're talking about annexing Northern Ireland. They're talking about taking Northern Ireland. Hey, we solve this problem easy just by annexing Northern Ireland. They don't say it that way, but they put it in this kind of legalese language that when you listen to it, you're like, wait a minute, he's talking about taking Northern Ireland. What is your solution, Theresa May? We have questions. We have questions. We have no answers to the questions that we're asking. Apparently, members of the House of Lords has given her a stunning rebuke and telling her, no, we don't like this idea of not having a customs union. And it's even putting the amendment forward to say, we want a customs union. That is a stunning defeat. Stunning defeat. Stunning loss. In fact, let me explain the House of Lords. And I'm not going to explain it. I'm going to let somebody else explain it. That's going to do a better job of explaining than I am. This is a little primer on the House of Lords because, again, their government is not exactly like ours. So, I don't want to get this wrong.
Hey, the House of Lords isn't some giant house party for rich old men. But who are the Lords and why do we have them? The Lords started off as a kind of advisory council to the King, who was much more powerful back then. They met up at Westminster every now and then to discuss matters of state. But in 1250...
Just to intervene here, there's a video in British history that goes back like 1,000 years. It's fascinating. I may get to that video one day, but one of the things, when she said that the king was much more powerful back then, the king was much more powerful back then. Ideas of war and everything else was fundamentally different. Ideas of patriotism, fundamentally different. Like, it's fascinating to see how that stuff has evolved. But one key point that I find that's always interests me, and I like to look at that from the context of then to now. The king fought a war with Parliament. Parliament started in this thing of this kind of advisory body to the king of sorts, but the king didn't necessarily want to be bothered with the affairs of state, so the king kind of delegated that. Well, Parliament became more powerful, of course, in the way that it went about its affairs, and at some point there was a divergence between Parliament and king. There was a war between the two. Parliament raised its arm, and the king raised his arm, and the king got his ass kicked. Now, after kicking the king's ass, royally kicking the king's ass, Parliament still said, but we need a king. They couldn't fathom a world without a king. Yeah, they couldn't fathom a world without having a king. So, here we are. It's like despite winning a war with the king, they still thought to themselves, well, the king is appointed by God. How can we not have a king to go about our affairs? Fucking amazing. It's absolutely fucking amazing. Like, think about that from the context of now, the capitalistic system. You have CEOs that make millions and billions of dollars. Bill Gates. How much money does Bill Gates have? Jeff Bezos. Over $100 billion. There is no reason a one person walking around with $100 billion mean your system has failed. That's what that means. There's no other way to look at that. I'm sorry. Any other context where you have somebody with so much and people walking around with so little. Your economic system is not designed, or is not, the point of an economic system should not be to give one person massive amounts of cash. It should be this distribution of wealth to the people in the society so they can have access to the things that they need. From a philosophical basis. Otherwise, what's the point of creating an economic system that gives wealth exclusively to the top? I'm making the point that that's what the system does. That means it's an utter failure. In the same way, people like to say, well, communism, it ended up with Stalin. Well, you have to own capitalism in the same way. You can't say, well, if we had the schoolboy capitalism, that something would be different. Nonsense. Things evolve. You have to take into account the way things evolve. You can't necessarily put restrictions on this particular system because the system likes to grow out of the restrictions. What was it like in FDR age from the standpoint of regulation? What is it like now? Can't have it both ways. Communism had Stalin, but capitalism, if it was something else, it would be something else. Can't have it both ways. All I'm saying is, look at it from our standpoint, in the sense of the elites. I went on a tangent, I'm sorry. We would say, well, that CEO must exist. I mean, somebody has to be the head of the company. Why? Why? Like in the same way somebody asks, why does the king need to exist? Parliament certainly is already taken to the affairs of the state. Why does the king need to exist? The same question needs to be asked by the capitalistic system. Why do CEOs need to exist? even if you want to make the argument that you need to maintain the capitalistic system the way it is, okay, I'm further to the left. Fair enough. But at the very least, get rid of the elites out of that system. Get rid of the CEOs and find ways to eliminate those systems in favor of co-ops. Co-ops have their own problems, fair enough, but god damn it, it is a change in the way we go about our affairs. And you have this system where elites are eating away at it, ebbs away the elites in the system, and you start evening out the distribution of wealth throughout the society itself. You also stop companies shipping jobs overseas. There are advantages to this. Yes, there's still disadvantages because you're still living in a capitalistic system. That was one of the questions I asked Richard Wolff. It's like, even when we work with co-ops, aren't you still in a capitalistic system, socialists? Like, aren't you still in the same system? I'm sorry, this is a magnificent tangent. Let me go back to the video. Let this video speak for itself. They're talking about the House of Lords. I just wanted to give this minor primer into some of the oddities and interesting things that took place in Britain. And that idea of a war with the king and still looked at the king as being appointed by God after the king lost the war. That's called hegemonic viewpoint of the world. I'm saying we have the same hegemonic viewpoint of the world that's erroneous, and it needs to change. Let's keep going.
King John, of Robin Hood fame, was forced to sign the Magna Carta, sharing power with the nobility. Trade became more and more important, leading to the rise of a new merchant class. By the 14th century, Edward III had two groups of advisors divided into chambers: the Lords and the Commons, made up of lesser knights and merchants. This is why we have two houses in Parliament. As time passed, the Commons became increasingly dominant, and the king became less powerful. In 1649, King Charles was even executed by the Commons. The balance of power between the houses swung firmly towards the Commons. From that day on, inheriting seats made the people feel like the Lords were only for the privileged. As society moved on and cultures changed, the questions arose. How have these people earned their place? How can they represent the public? In 1958, the Life Peerages Act introduced women into the House and radically changed who's in the Lords. From then on, any man or woman could come into the House based on what they had achieved in their career. The Lords Act of 1999 reduced the number of hereditary peers in the House and stopped Lords passing their seat to their own family. A panel was made to help the Prime Minister decide who is brought into the House, so that now the House is made up of people from all walks of life: political peers, crossbench peers, as well as hereditary peers and bishops. They all use their experience from inside and outside of Parliament to check and challenge government. So what does the House of Lords do on a daily basis? The House has three main functions: to question and challenge the work of the government, to work with the Commons to shape laws, and to investigate issues through committees and debates to help improve the way the country is governed. The House of Lords is currently the second busiest legislative chamber in the world, right after the Commons. Its chamber is laid out in the same way as the Commons: the government party on the one side, the opposition on the other. Peers who don't belong to any political party are known as crossbenchers, as they sit on the crossbenches opposite the woolsack. The woolsack is the Lord Speaker's seat. Back when wool used to be our main trade, this seat was supposed to remind the Lords to protect our trade. It was, and still is, stuffed with the wool from hundreds of sheep from around the Commonwealth. Strange seats aside, the Lords is different to the Commons because there's no majority for any political party. The party in power does not necessarily have the most seats. As the Lords are not elected, they're less caught up in party politics and can concentrate on their three main functions. So most people have some preconceived idea of what the Lords are, but the reality is quite different. What do you think?
Fascinating snapshot of House of Lords. A clever way of doing it, not so much dry. Well, that House of Lords has just decided to vote down Theresa May in regards to her idea of the customs union and the red line with the customs union. They don't like it. They've had crossbenchers essentially shoot down her legislation. There's two articles on this, The Guardian and CNN's. I actually like CNN's one's a little bit better for the American audience, so let's take a look at CNN's. UK government loses key Brexit vote. Oh, failure. Failure. The UK government has lost a key Brexit vote, with the upper house of parliament backing calls to remain in the EU customs union after Brexit. The House of Lords voted 348 to 225 to amend the government's EU withdrawal bill, which will now return to the House of Commons, where the defeat is likely to spur renewed opposition. The amendment requires the government to report to Parliament by October 31st with what steps it has taken to remain in the customs union, which allow goods to flow freely from across the European Union. That's amazing. That is amazing. Theresa May says, I am leaving the customs union. And the upper house says, no, you need to report back to us on what steps you're taking to stay in the customs union. Oh, that's amazing. Fucking amazing. The government opposed the amendment. No shit. Prime Minister May has previously said Britain will not remain in the customs union after Brexit takes effect. The House of Lords is now considering other amendments to the proposed legislation. Oh, they're getting active now. The customs union enables the 28 EU member states and other countries such as Turkey that have signed to its rules to function in a single trading area. Now, understand what this means, though. This is not as simple as they're making it sound. If they stay in the EU, that means you have to amend by its laws. Yes, you can be a part of the Federation providing you're willing to abide by the laws of this organizing body. What laws the EU puts down, those nations have to amend to. But you can't have it both ways. Britain can't say we have security in our borders and our trading regulations while at the same time being a part of the EU customs union. You can't have it both ways. You're going to have to give up some of your sovereignty if you want to remain in the customs union. This is why Theresa May said we're coming out of the EU. She didn't say it willy-nilly. She didn't even say it because she necessarily wanted to. They voted for Brexit. She says, fine, we're going to have a Brexit. I'm taking you out. Well, you have somewhat of a dilemma. If you stay in the customs union, then you're not really out. You're not exactly out. You're still abiding by the regulations in those countries, meaning the EU is still altering your laws. It's a pickle. It is a pickle. In practice, it means that cars made in France can be sent to Italy without facing tariffs or customs checks at the border. Goods made outside of the union are allowed to circulate freely once they've gained initial entry. However, membership prevents a country from negotiating its own bilateral trade deals with other nations. Right. The ability to agree new trade deals, which the United States or China, for example, is central to Prime Minister Theresa May's vision in Britain after Brexit. In a speech in September, she ruled out staying in the customs union. So you can understand how utterly amazing this is. She says we're leaving. And the upper house of parliament, the Lord says, yeah, understand that's your opinion, man, but come back to us by October 31st with the steps that you've taken to stay. Wow. Reactions. I love the CNN version of this. The government said it regretted the defeat. I imagine it did. The fundamental purpose of this bill is to prepare our statute books for exit date. It is not about the terms of our exit, a spokeswoman said for the departure of exiting the European Union said in a statement. This amendment does not commit the UK to remaining in the customs union with the EU. It requires us to make the statement in Parliament explaining the steps we've taken. Our policy on this subject is very clear. We're leaving the customs union and will establish new... Oh, wow, wait a minute. Maybe I misread that. The amendment does not commit the EU to remaining in the customs union with the EU. It requires us to make a statement in Parliament explaining the steps we've taken. God, I love politics. I love politics. That's amazing. She knows what they've meant. Like, it's the letter of the law. She's saying, look, the statement that the upper lord said, we regret that they disagree with us. But their statement, what they've said, requires us to come to Parliament and just make a statement about staying in the EU. We ourselves have been committed to leaving, so that's what we're going to do. What they said does not in any way stop us from leaving the European Union. We just have to make a statement about the steps we're taking to stay. I love politics and law. It's fucking amazing. It's so amazing. Like, there's a certain amount of shame that you can take on because you know exactly what they meant. But you're saying, I don't care what you mean. The letter of the law, in this case, I have you through legal means of saying, well, you just said I needed to say in the House to what steps we've taken. We've taken no steps because we're not going to take any steps because we're going out of the customs union. What you said didn't stop us from going out of the customs union. You only said we need to say something about it. I love it. I love it. I love it. I had to read it twice. I was like, wait a minute. Let's see. However, Andrew Adonis, his name is Adonis, who sits in the House of Lords on the opposition Labour benches, said, at long last, a voice of common sense on the Brexit has made itself heard in Parliament. It's simply impossible to do Brexit without a custom commons, so the House of Lords has spoken up for good and responsive government. However, even with a customs union, Britain will still be worse off if we leave. That is why we need a people's vote on the final deal. There's been a loud chorus of people who started to come in, the Blairites, saying, oh my God, this is going to be a disaster. This is the Titanic. We're about to hit a rock. The world is going to fall apart. The sky's falling. The sky's falling. Now, I think, if I'm being honest, to some degree, I am concerned for Britain on this. I'm just being honest. Now, I'm concerned for Britain on a few fronts. What's going to take place with Northern Ireland? I have no idea what you guys are going to do with Northern Ireland. She's hell set on this customs union thing. So, I don't know an answer to that. She doesn't know an answer to that. The stuff she's given is fairy tales, rainbows, and unicorns. She has not given an actual answer to what's going to take place with Ireland. Customs is at the very least one step in a way of trying to mend that difference. But Britain, come on, you're stuck in an impossible situation of saying, look, it seems like it's one way or the other. The UK, Ireland, EU said we're not making deals. We're not making piecemeal deals. You can't just come at the, I'm going to take a little turkey, but I'm going to leave the spaghetti. No, you have to get it all. You have to take it all. A customs union, if that allows you this kind of piecemeal way of not falling apart, you probably should consider it. The idea of a secondary vote, however, bothers me greatly. It bothers me greatly. You had a vote. Those people said what they wanted. We want Brexit. We want to leave. Fair enough. That's what you get. Now, the vote teeters with still people are kind of in this intermediary state on whether or not they want to leave or whether they want to stay. So, but that's what it was before the vote. Meaning, it's most likely the vote hasn't changed, or if it has changed, only by a few percentage points. But it's grossly unfair to have a referendum and then have a secondary referendum in order to countermand the first referendum. Are you shitting me? Like, is this what you're really considering? The people of Britain made a vote, and you're trying to say you're going to have another vote because you don't necessarily like the outcome of the very first vote. Screw that. If your issue is the way you're leaving with Brexit, fair enough. But that's your issue. That's the political war. The political war needs to take place on what Brexit are we going to have. If you're saying we don't want to have a hard Brexit, then fight like hell to not have a hard Brexit. But the idea of having a secondary vote should be off the table. I'm sorry. I don't like this. Like, imagine a situation of having a referendum for Medicare for all. Republicans get in office, you have another referendum because you think you can take it out on the second referendum. And then you have a third, fourth. How many votes can we have? Republicans had 50-something votes in order to take out Obamacare. Think about that shit. No, they didn't necessarily have the votes to do it, but they still had those votes. Like, I'm making the point that you're passing something, and you're getting the people to step up. You had a magnificent number of people to come for Brexit. You had to get all those people to step up and say, this is what we want. And now, the people, the Blairites of the bunch, the people were like, we never liked this Brexit thing in the first place, and now we want to see if we can find reasons and ways in order to get a second way to take this out. Your issue here is the way that Theresa May is handling Brexit, if I'm being honest. It's not necessarily the Brexit itself. I understand that there are difficulties associated with Brexit. I understand it's magnificently complex. I understand that you are going to get a shit end of the deal with the EU regardless of how it turns out, because the EU is not wanting a situation where you guys look good in this process. All of that's true. All of that's true. But the people spoke. It's what they wanted. When Greece had their referendum and all those people said, tell Germany to go fuck themselves, they should have stuck with that. Don't have a referendum and then go back on the referendum. It makes you look ridiculous. I think Greece should have been willing to take themselves out of the EU on the spot. All that time that they had taken when they were having a referendum and all this other stuff, they should have been pairing and making plans to take them out the EU as a worst case scenario. If you're going to throw out the nuclear bomb option in that way, then you're going to have to be willing to use the nuclear bomb option in that way. Otherwise, A, you've let your people down, meaning you've demoralized the people of your country over the things that you were willing to accept politically. And B, you look weak. You look profoundly weak. And I can tell you this, people do not look like people being weak, representing their interests. A second referendum looks weak. Don't do it. Jeremy Corbyn, don't do it. Meaning, if this government collapses because of the ridiculousness that they're encountering, don't have a second referendum. There are Blairites in your thing that wants to do it. Don't do it. If you want to deal with the people who are freaked out about Brexit, deal with it in the way you handle Brexit, not necessarily having a second referendum. So that's my 2 cents from across the pond. Let's see. Is there anybody here? I don't know if anybody here is even interested in this. Thanks for your work, Jamal. Nicole Heron. Thank you. Oh, wow. There are people here. Joshua Rinshaw. Glad you got your live stream ability back. I had to go like 2 days without knowing what the Progressive Voices marching orders were. Oh, funny. Woo! Live stream again. Also nice to see you interacting with Jordan Sheridan. I value your content enough to give you money. TYT never did that. Joel Sass, thank you, man. I appreciate it. Nicole Heron, thanks for your work, Jamal. Guys, you have no idea how much I appreciate that. Like, it keeps the show going. I say that, and I mean that in a real way. I don't want to become this kind of animatronic robot when I say that. But I try to grow this show, and I try to make the show into a real thing. I look at this as a part-time job. And so, you guys help. You guys help magnificently. Progressive Voices marching orders trips me out like nobody's business. Guys, I'm going to open this up for live stream, for calls. If you want to call in, feel free to call in. There are about 64 people here, so feel free. YouTube manually reviewed a video of mine that I did not request and completely demonetized my recent long-form parody video of Syria. Yes, they have. Winkle, I've shown you my I've shown you guys my content. Like, all the videos that I do of Syria get demonetized. Just, if I say Syria, demonetized. If I talk about what's taking place in Israel or Yemen, demonetized. If you mention any kind of conflict stuff, demonetized. It's fucking amazing, actually. They even demonetized the video that had nothing to do with any kind of, like, angry or aggressive content. For example, let's see. Well, I don't need to show it. I've shown it once before. But it's insane. It's like you're penalized for talking about stuff that's relevant. That's absolutely relevant. It's amazing. If you want to talk about cats, you're perfectly okay as long as you don't talk about cats fighting one another, in which case at that point then they're going to demonetize your video because apparently cats fighting one another is somehow traumatic to corporations. Yeah, it's aggravating. It's aggravating. To say the least, it's aggravating. So Winkle, I know where you're coming from, man. I know where you're coming from. Where am I? Damn it, I lost myself. Oh, there I am. Jamal, talk about the Windrush generation and their immigration status in the UK. They're being kicked out because Theresa May's regulation that they have been here for years. So I saw the Prime Minister questions this morning. I didn't fully understand everything that was going on in that. I think if I lived in Britain, I would probably understand what's taking place. I need to look that up. Jeremy Corbyn got in her ass about this. But there was some weirdness about whether or not it's this thing where the decision was made, and this is in the weeds, guys, I'm sorry. but the decision was made to destroy certain documents. But she's saying it was made in, I guess, the Blair administration, whereas Jeremy Corbyn is saying it was implemented in her administration or in the Cameron administration. The sad part about this is Jeremy Corbyn is being held to stuff that took place under the Blairites. Like he's stuck with this gum of the Blairites. So I don't necessarily know the full story of what's true in this. It's very possible that it was the Blairites that implemented this particular policy, where it was, or the Blairites that agreed to implement this policy, where it was their government that carried out the policy. I'm not sure. I don't know enough about it. Yeah, don't know enough about it. Symbiosis Modest. He would love it if Labour take over and get the blame for everything that goes wrong with Brexit. I have to be honest, I kind of like the idea that Theresa May is taking a hit for Brexit, because I don't know a full answer for Brexit. Like, I don't know an answer to it. Like how do you square that circle? I guess you can say a customs union, but a customs union means you're not quite out of the European Union. The question becomes, how much of a Brexit can they got stomach? Jamal, did you see the interview with Jimmy Dore did with Richard Alman, Republican candidate in San Diego, running on the Direct Democracy platform? I did not. Republican running on Direct Democracy. That's interesting. Would you really want a direct democracy? I mean, think about it. Can you imagine everybody in your city having to go and vote on each and every issue? Do you think the people of your city will vote on each and every issue in that way? Like, if people prodded to and you asked people what they wanted, maybe. I guess my issue would be, how would that work? I don't know how that work. But it's interesting that a Republican is running on that ticket, though. I agree with you on that one. But I haven't seen the interview. Cognitive Alchemist. He was a libertarian. The voting is done online. Do you trust the voting online? Like, if we had these kind of quantum encryptions where you can kind of say, yes, this is somewhat of an unbreakable code, or at the very least, so unbreakable that it's much unlikely that it is unbreakable. But is that where we are right now? The voting online thing, just it slightly freaks me out. We have a call. Sir Bikesalat Day. What's happening, Sir Bikesalat Day?
Yeah, that's me. No, I'm enjoying. I always enjoy your programming, and you're asking for callers tonight. I've noticed that that a lot of people don't talk as the reason as to why a lot of people voted for Brexit in Britain.
Go for it. And why did people vote for Brexit in Britain? Do you live in Britain?
No, I'm a truck driver here in the States. I'm from San Antonio, Texas.
Ah, okay.
The reason that I heard from this guy called John Michael Greer,
yeah.
And if you ever have a chance, interview him. He's this druid, American druid, and he writes. I can't think of the word, but he writes to what's going on in politics, not just American, but worldwide.
Okay.
And where his blog is called Ecosophia. And he has more of this, you ever heard of James Howard Kunstler?
No, I haven't.
You know, James Howard Kunstler is this big thing in the peak oil thing. He wrote...
I do know the peak oil thing. I don't know the person by name, but I do know the peak oil thing, saying that at some point we're going to get to peak oil, and at that point he's sort of
on board with that. But anyway, he was pointing out the fact that just like here in the United States, how our jobs are going overseas, in Europe, because of the EU, the cheaper employment is in the old Eastern Bloc.
Yes.
So all those jobs are, like here, they're going to cheaper places. The same thing. They're going to the cheaper places in the EU, specifically in the old Soviet
states. It's a faulty model. It's a really faulty model. Like it started. It never meant to be like. It wasn't meant to be it started off as something else, and it kind of grew into this kind of European Union, where they started off at this point trying to be more like states. It's very weird in the way they've kind of organized themselves. But the business model with this idea of a euro, when they have these kind of different economic systems or different, you know, it's like the currency is different. So if I wanted to go travel in Romania, it's going to be a hell of a lot cheaper than if I went to travel in Germany. Well, that means that the labor and everything else is going to be cheaper in those countries, which means the companies are going to be incentivized to leave where they are to go to those countries. Like, you're right. It's just like it is here, where companies strive for this kind of cheaper labor that they can get their hands on. Yeah, I agree, man. Go for it. I'm sorry. I interrupted.
No, that's fine. That's what's really going on there. It's happening all over the world to where a good example is the textile manufacturers. They've been going to the cheapest locations forever, and they sort of hit this rock called Bangladesh. Yeah. They can't seem to get out of it because if they go to, let's say, places in Africa, they will have to pay more for the people in Africa than they do to the people in Bangladesh. It's one of those interesting dilemmas when it comes to prices and goods. And this is what's driving that problem with the euro, because you have the richer northern nations competing with the poorer southern nations, and it's just creating that dilemma. Another reason the reason why, and I heard this on James Howard Kunstler's podcast, why Greece didn't leave the EU is because if they would have left the EU, they would have had to they couldn't buy oil like under euros or something about using a certain currency. I don't think it was dollars, but I was thinking more to do with euros or something, that basically said, hey, okay, we're going to take away your fuel supply if you leave the EU.
See,
and that's why Greece couldn't leave.
From my understanding, they made no plans about it. Like one of the things that I can't think of his name, Varoufakis, was talking about, saying, like, as the stuff that they were talking about in the scene, like the background, while this was going on, they never made plans. Like they thought that the referendum itself would be strong enough. Like, I understand what you're saying. You may be right, but I guess I'm making a point that they never even got to the consideration. People always assume that people make considerations. You know, they're thinking of the exits. They weren't thinking of all the exits. Like, they never even got to that point of considering whether or not this was a good idea to do. They thought the referendum in and of itself was strong enough to say, Greece is saying no to what you're trying to do. Germany looked at that and said, whatever, man, whatever. And they shut their banks down. The government came to heel within a few days. I mean, I feel you with the gas thing. You may be absolutely right, where they just said this is an impossible thing. We shouldn't even go past that point. So you may not be wrong in the least. But I guess my feeling is your country said no. Your country said no. What are you supposed to do with that? And even the Brexit thing. The Brexit thing is fascinating to me because you're probably right. People tried to make this out like racism, whereas it's more minute, like it's more context than that, or it's more there's more to it than that. It's not we hate all of these other groups. It's no, we're losing our jobs. We're feeling more competitive towards these other groups because we're losing our jobs. And you have people who stir that up and try to make that a little bit more than what it is. But I don't necessarily think, in the same way, I didn't think all these people were racist who voted for Trump. I didn't think all these people were racist that went for Brexit. But yeah, I think it's more. Yeah, I think you're more. Put it this way, I think you're more right than anything else. It probably was. I mean, it's otherwise. How would they be able to even get to the point of stirring that conflict? Like, if you notice, like people like Nigel Farage and some of the other people were stirring this idea of resentments of sorts. Those resentments were there for a reason, and I suspect that reason is what you're talking about: losing their jobs and having this kind of competitive thing. Agreed.
Yeah, as a truck driver, I go around the country, and basically my company doesn't go east of I-35, so I'm pretty much on the eastern part of the country, and I've driven in places in the back, in the back country of West Virginia. And when you drive through West Virginia, it's always interesting. You don't see solar panels. You see solar panels all over the places. You see solar farms. But if you ever drive through West Virginia, you never see a solar panel anywhere except on the railroad, except on like a CSX post. And those people there, from what I get, it's like we know things are bad. But another thing is, I used to pick up in an area where this guy that drove that car in Charlottesville.
Yeah.
I think he's from Defiant, Ohio. And I've been picking up in Napoleon there. There's a customer that my trucking company goes in. That area where that guy came from in Ohio is a rust bucket of words. There's plenty of farms. There's plenty of farms everywhere, but it doesn't feel like nothing worth striving for.
You know what's wild? To put a pin in the West Virginia thing, West Virginia was a coal thing. It was like an engine for the United States in this way. We've let them down magnificently. I think if they're like 48th in regards to wages or something like that in the country. The idea for that much wealth to come out of West Virginia and all of a sudden that country, I mean that state, to be left in the state that it's been in, it's sad. I mean, it's extraordinarily let down. Those people of West Virginia should have been magnificently compensated for the coal that they've been getting. Meaning, if you're a member, if you were born in West Virginia, you should have got something from that part. Like, it shouldn't be this situation where it gives so much and gets so little in return for what it gives. And especially to be left kind of in the ruins in the way it's been. Yeah, West Virginia should not have been left in the situation it's been in. Joe Manchin has been a complete and utter failure in West Virginia.
Yeah.
My 2 cents anyway.
No, that's just one of the sad things about it. When you go to these places, it's that I'm going to get into race here. And for the record, I'm a white guy, okay?
Okay.
And a lot of Trump supporters, okay, I'm from San Antonio, Texas. So for me, people speaking Spanish, whatever, I have no problem with it. You know, whatever. Okay. But here's the thing about that. I go to a lot of warehouses where I pick up loads, and I've always noticed this, that in right-to-work states north of the South, like north of Tennessee, that if I'm in a right-to-work state and I go to a warehouse picking up a load, I'm talking to a Hispanic person. I'm talking to somebody from Latin America in the Chicago area and in New Jersey. I'm talking somebody, maybe not necessarily from Mexico, but from Eastern Europe.
Okay.
And I have noticed that if I go to a state that does not have a right-to-work law, the people I go inside and see not just working behind the counter, where handling my paperwork, my bill of lading, but the people working the floor, the grunts. If I'm in, like, Ohio, the people in Ohio are the local people, are the Americans, as it were. And I always find it kind of funny that you vote for a guy, you vote for a party that believes in right to work, and yet...
Well, they don't know what it means. I don't think they know what it means.
Yeah, but when I go to those states, it's like, gee,
Yeah, I don't think they know what it means. I mean, like, I think they use the Orwellian language in order to kind of obfuscate the meaning. Like, if you said, look, we're going to stop you from forming unions here, and we have the right to fire you whenever, you know, just for shits and giggles. And I think if you're saying it from the perspective of a cultural identity of the party itself, then they're more inclined to accept it just because it came from the party itself. Calling it right to work essentially helps it go through without people actually really analyzing what they're talking about that's going through. I don't necessarily know. I don't think they know what that stuff actually means per se. And I think because it's coded in the language of that particular party and they have this cultural identity associated with the party, it goes through. Like I think about this from the standpoint of me as an African-American male, being associated with the Democratic Party, almost lock, stock, and barrel, where it's sacrosanct. What's your political party? What do you mean, what's my political party? There's only one. You know what I mean? It's 90-something% of people, of African Americans, voted for Hillary Clinton. So I'm trying to get across to you how ingrained it is to vote for the Democrat. And I think, why do I think that way? Like, why is that my thought process? Or why was that my thought process? And for the most part, it's a thought process that you don't even evaluate. The Democrat says this, he's more inclined to lean a particular way that I think I like more so than the other person. I don't look that far into it because I'm not paying that much attention. And I accept what the Democrats say, and the Democratic saying the Republican is full of shit, so I think the Republican is full of shit. No need to evaluate below what's they're talking about. I think that's what's going on for the other side too. Because I understand what you mean. It's like, how on earth can you vote for this? It's like you're voting for something that's hurting you. How are you voting for something that's literally hurting you? And I'm saying they're voting for something that's hurting them because they're not making connection to the real world phenomena of what's taking place. At least I don't think they are. I don't think they are. I could be wrong. I don't think they are.
No, I think you're right. I'm just always wondering about, like, dude, it's right there.
Yeah. But you look at it, though. The difference is you look at it. Like you look beneath the surface and you don't necessarily take what they're saying is absolutely true. You're somewhat skeptical and cynical when you look at it. Those people aren't. They're not. They're not. I swear to you, they're not. They're not. Dude, I want to thank you for calling. I appreciate your call, man.
Hey, none the problem. I love listening to you. And my fiance, she listens to, she watches MSNBC. I've been trying to make her stop watching that corporate crap. And she has a nickname for you. It's called Girlfriend. So
oh, God. That's hilarious. That's hilarious. You know what?
She loves you too. She loves you too.
Oh, thank you. Ed Schultz. So Ed Schultz has said that MSNBC, essentially, he believes that MSNBC fired him because he was supporting Sanders. He said MSNBC called him on the night Sanders was about to announce and told him. I heard
the interview.
Man, that's amazing, right? So it's like Cenk Uygur has said the same thing. Then somebody called him into a room and said, look, we need you to shut up about this, stop bullying the politicians. Jordan Chariton said something similar. So you're finding that there's a list of people who work for MSNBC who are being essentially shut down or told to tow a particular narrative of events. So I understand she likes MSNBC, but at the very least, they're like an arm of the Democratic Party. And can you really fully trust what's being told? It's like, how do you know that this is just not part of a narrative and that this particular narrative is being managed by the corporate part of the MSNBC? But I feel you. I'm not gonna trash your wife's or your fiance's viewing habits.
The thing about that is trying to get my thoughts together. The companies that fund those corporate those news services, Raytheon and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I've been paying attention to the weapons being thrown and at Syria.
Yeah.
And the one thing you don't hear about is the fact that those cheap-ass missiles, those old Soviet missiles, what we here in the West think, oh, that is just like a guy with a slingshot. Well, one of those things took out or at least damaged our overpriced F-35, an Israeli F-35.
Yeah.
So, and I remember the first bombing, which I like to dub the Bill Clinton maneuver, that Trump did. And the thing is, what they're not talking about, this scares the hell out of me, is that Russia wasn't talking about the technology that was used. And the first thing, they just said, oh, look, the Americans are stupid. Their missiles can't hit worth a damn. When I first saw that strike, I knew either electronic warfare, sometimes something like the Fairlink system was used on our ordinances.
No,
and
it is.
From what I've been hearing from the strike.
No, they've said so. They've openly said so.
They said so the first one? Well, I know the second one they said so, but I don't know about the first one. I think they were keeping us hush. Well, and ever since then, I've been paying attention. Apparently, the the way they're going about defending Syria is not to shoot down everything that flies over Syria, but to shoot the unmanned ordinances in a way to garner support in diplomatic negotiations, because Assad realizes, Putin realizes, you can't take down this giant. So
they said they were scrambling. Okay, so the part that I saw, they said that they were scrambling. They were electronic warfare. Essentially, they were already engaged in scrambling the munitions and the jet and the missiles and the drones. So they were already involved in doing that. The United States comes out and says Russia is using electronic warfare on our drones, meaning those guys are already engaged in something. Like, this is magnificently dangerous. You have the United States, France, the UK, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, who else? Syria, Russia, Iran, all engaged and interested in one country. And all of those countries have like a dog in the hunt in that particular country and supporting sides in that particular country. That is terrifying. In fact, Russia is aligned with China. So just like in World War I, where you had all of these countries in this kind of alignment with one another, it's like they chose their sides based on their alignments. It's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying. Yeah, and the person who's in charge of all this is Donald fucking Trump. Reality show host extraordinary.
I don't think it's people behind the scenes. It's all the neocons. But here's the thing about this: is historian I heard on Slate about the First World War. I'll hang up because I gotta go to bed.
Go for it.
But he said that the one thing he noticed about the First World War that is similar to what you just mentioned, this is going to frighten you, is that they weren't afraid of using any weapon in their arsenal.
No, they weren't. And they did.
At all.
And they did. Which is why the gas thing, believe it or not, it's not so much the gas is that devastating of a thing. No, it's because gas is ensconced in the mind of the Western powers. Like when they had these images in France or of European soldiers with, this face gnarled from gas attacks where they're choking and whatnot. Well, it left this kind of scar. It's an indelible scar in the consciousness of Western powers. And so any use of gas for them is this kind of freak out point of, oh my God, gas! Oh my God, gas! Now, it's different for us. And it's different from some of these other nations, because some of these other nations were engaged in warfare in the same way. Or at the very least, they didn't have that mark on their head. But they were willing to use any weapon that they had at their disposal to win that war, especially when it got down to that trench warfare where it didn't seem to be moved, where the line didn't seem to be moving. Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, I'll let you go, and please keep up the good work.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
We need voices like you out there.
I appreciate it. I try.
All right.
Thanks, man. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.
All right. Very cool. So I'm going to end this. This has gone about an hour. Guys, thank you for joining me, man. And let's see. Sir Bike Salat. Theresa May is like President Obama. She's in charge, but has the opposition holding the votes. Well, her opposition is holding the votes on this particular one. I mean, look, I think people are freaked out about Brexit. That's what I think. And I think people are raising their voice saying, wait a minute, what you're saying doesn't quite make sense. And we do not want to disrupt the Good Friday Agreement. That's what I think is taking place. And so I think those voices are getting louder and saying, we don't like what you're doing. The European Union, the voices in the European Union are getting louder. We don't like what you're doing, and what you're doing is not making sense. So, we still don't know what Brexit means. We still don't know what Brexit means, and I suspect neither does Theresa May, and that should terrify Britain. Sir Bike Salat Day, I love that name, Sir Bike Salat Day. Nicole Heron, Joel Sass, Joshua Renshaw, guys, thank you very much. I appreciate your help with the show. It's absolutely helpful. Well, I appreciate your help with the show. It's absolutely helpful is what I'm about to say, but that sounds a little ridiculous. So, thank you for your help. I'll leave it at that. All right, guys, if you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you guys can always help the show through Patreon or Super Cash. Thanks, guys, and have a good night. I'll see you tomorrow.